Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you into something else is the greatest accomplishment." And Eric Hoffer said, "When people are free to do as they please, they invariably imitate others." What a strange world we live in. And social pressure is a real thing. More than that, conformity is. We really seem to be in a world where the group is more important than ever. But it really seems as if it's getting a little out of hand. We can now see so clearly for ourselves how much damage that can do. How when people go along with the group, thought, rational thinking, good behavior often flies right out of the window. So what is the issue with conformity? Why do we do it? And more importantly, how do we break out of that way of being? How do we be ourselves healthily in a world that is constantly trying to stop us? Generally speaking, conformity is all about going along with and agreeing to the majority position, either because you want to fit in, or because you want to be right, or because you want to conform, agree with society's ways, or identify with a particular group, or perhaps avoid some kind of negative consequence. And it has all sorts of manifestations. I mean, one of the most interesting, pertinent, and scary manifestations of groupthink and conformity that we see in our world today is what's called cancel culture. Cancel culture is really about how groups of people, usually on social media like Twitter, target someone who they perceive as having committed some error, some violation, often some moral violation. Often it's jumped on when someone says something or turns out to have in the past said something that they, the cancelers, disagree with, or in defense of someone they like. You often see, for example, when a celebrity like Taylor Swift complains about something online, or complains that a particular person might have injured her, or that particular person might make a post, thousands, if not millions of other people jump onto the bandwagon in order to attack the person who is perceived as at fault. So why do we do that? A lot of the reasons we do that are the basic reasons of why we feel such a strong need to conform. Firstly, it increases our status, it increases our social status. The biggest motive, according to Dr. Rob Henderson, that underlies cancel culture and our urge to get in there is social status. Even research shows that admiration from our peers is more important to our sense of well-being than how much money we have, and social and socioeconomic status. So that's a very powerful motivator. We want to increase our social status even more than we want to increase how much money we've got. And studies also show that, generally speaking, the more you perceive yourself as belonging to a higher social class, the more likely you are to do practically anything to stay and climb in that social rank. So the higher your social status, the more likely you are to conform to pressure to do things that increase that social status. People who already have money, relative to other people, of course, are much more likely to pursue things which increase that status, because that's how they got there in the first place. By having status and by being driven to status, they now have created a situation where they need to maintain status, and they need to maintain that higher position they believe they have in the society. So they will often then engage in new ways of moving upwards, breaking through, avoiding slipping downwards, and conforming to the group is one of the most powerful ways to do that. As Henderson says it, for upward climbers and social strivers, cancel culture has created new opportunities to move up by taking others down. Cancel culture is all about taking others down. So by engaging in it, it also reduces the social status of enemies. On the one hand, one's own status increases, and on the other hand, it exposes who disagrees and takes their status down. You know, one of the simplest ways to look at that is that it's easier to take down your enemies than it is to praise your friends. It is easier to get social points by taking down your enemies than by doing good things. Because doing good things, it's harder to penetrate the perception that you've done something good, because there's very little value to other people in jumping on that bandwagon. They can jump on a criticize, take down, cancel bandwagon because that will elevate their own status. But to jump on a bandwagon of good, it doesn't necessarily benefit them in any kind of way. We're quick to assign blame for something, but it's harder to assign praise for something because there's no result for praise. Whereas with blame, we might be seen as right. We might be seen as superior. We might be seen as belonging to the group that's right, which is really in many ways what we're trying to do. It is relatively difficult to go far and achieve any kind of status through the good things, and that's why cancel culture works so well, because it's got a quick reward, it's got instant reward, because even research shows us that people are engaging in grandstanding in order to enhance their social rank, and social rank is the thing that everyone wants to enhance. Cancel culture. Then you have the strengthening of the bonds. So it's not just a solitary activity. When you engage in that, you participate with a group. You identify yourself as a member of that group and in agreement with that group. And of course, we enjoy the sense of solidarity, the sense of coming together, the sense of being accepted, and the sense of social bonds that do that. Again, doing good things can increase the status of your group, but it's slower and harder to penetrate. It's harder to unite a group to do something positive, because how do you get everyone to agree on what's right? Much easier to get everyone to agree with what's wrong, because that just involves criticism or identification of the enemy and attacking them. So you can unite a group much more easily under negative things like criticism and judgment and the moral superiority than you can in any positive behavior, which is harder to measure. You know, when you all get together to do something good, there's a chance that you're going to fail. When you all get together to attack someone, take them down, and criticize them, no failure involved. You can only succeed in that goal. You all feel socially bonded, you all feel socially accepted, and your status increases. So cancel culture feeds into some of our most base and negative feelings, especially since nothing can stop you. What's to stop you succeeding? Often lots of factors that you don't control. What's to stop you taking someone down? Nothing. Perhaps most importantly about cancel culture and things like that work around group conformity is that there are immediate good results. The reward is immediate. You're immediately a member of the group, you immediately get reaction and response, you immediately get agreement, you immediately feel part of something. Whereas if there are to be any negative consequences or punishments or whatever down the line, they are relatively remote. So the rewards are fast, if not instant. And that's a powerful motivator for almost everything that we do. So cancel culture and that negative behavior tends to reinforce itself because it produces such fast results of group acceptance. And you can hear why it becomes so dangerous that way, that the whole idea of consequences and the whole value of consequences pretty much completely disappears, which social media illustrates very well. To a very large extent, there are no consequences for that behavior. Conformity isn't always a bad thing. I mean, conformity also helps establish certain social rules. It's often pointed out that the success of the anti-smoking movement that managed to eventually stop smoking by law in most indoor places, in some outdoor places, and made it socially acceptable, that is a form of social pressure and groupthink that has positive results. It has positive results on private and public health and all sorts of other consequences. Although, arguably, there is an element of dangerous groupthink there. It may be great that smoking is bad for you, so it's good when groupthink stops smoking, but the group gets to decide what's bad for you. Smoking is bad for you, sure, scientifically, although 100 years ago they might not have said so. So it's always a little bit dubious about what might be identified. And yes, sometimes the good things benefit because of groupthink, but overall there is a danger of the group deciding what's right and what's wrong, and everyone having to conform with that. Basically, what drives the need to belong to the group is a certain amount of insecurity. It's quite natural to feel a little bit insecure and want to be accepted and want to be seen as good or likable or whatever the case may be. We also unconsciously imitate other people, especially people who've succeeded in the group. So we try and imitate them, we try and succeed by imitating them. And then we feel a certain amount of pressure to be loyal to our group. So we go along with things that the group does and go along with things that the group says, and it simplifies our thinking. We become less critical, we become less particular about what it is that we're doing. And in the end, emotion takes over, and emotions like panic, like hatred, like feelings of superiority, which are then often stoked by charismatic leaders. In the end, decisions get made based on conformity and fear and overconfidence, and aggression and violence often emerge. So the end result of conformity is frequently destructive or damaging behavior, especially towards the other. Of course, a variation of that is also sometimes when we're in a group situation, in order to succeed in the group, we need to emulate the behavior of others in the group who have succeeded. So we try and fit in. There are really two types of conformity, or if you like, two types of reasons why we conform. So one is the type that we've been speaking about that helps us fit in with the group, that makes us not want to be rejected by the group, and where we start complying with the group. We want to fit in, so we don't know how to. We lack the knowledge, so we trust others in the group. We look to others for guidance, or when our own behavior, we don't know what to do, we look to the group around us to see what is everyone else doing. And so we conform to that, which usually is some kind of internalized process where we actually start accepting the views of the group. It can even happen where we don't agree. It's like, if we're going around the room and the teacher is asking everyone, what is the capital of South Africa? And everyone says Pietermaritzburg. And you know that it isn't. But eventually, if everyone says Pietermaritzburg, chances are you're going to say Pietermaritzburg, even if you know it isn't. In more subtle than that, perhaps, but we know, we do it ourselves, we see other people do it. When people change their behavior in order to conform with what is correct or to be correct. So despite what they think, in the group situation, they suddenly change their behavior or they change their answer. And that helps them be accepted by the group, look more knowledgeable, don't look foolish, which is a terrible thing. We don't ever want to look foolish, so that also increases the normative behavior. And then there's the fear of punishment or the fear of rejection, and so often that means we'll go along with rules even when we don't agree with them. And a lot of this explains why political parties end up behaving the way that they do, governments behave the way they do. It's because people in the group, in the powerful party, risk losing their power and whatever resources it brings to them if they don't conform with the group. So you can look at something like the ANC or the Republican Party or whatever your particular thing may be, and see how did they stray off their path so much? How did the liberation movement focus towards uplifting the downtrodden, the poor, the oppressed, and so on, end up being focused around acquiring as much money, resources, and power, and not caring about all those other people? It isn't about they don't care, or that's what, they didn't ever want to do that, or whatever. It's that old story, as we saw with the tremendous corruption that we've seen in this country. There's a tremendous pressure to conform. It's reinforced by rewards such as money, status, power, and group acceptance, and people will actually go against what they think and believe in order to be accepted, in order to not lose power, in order to not get punished, and in order to increase status. All of that easily explains the tremendous spread of corruption like a cancer into a group that was the very same group once associated with higher moral values, or whatever the case may be. So what can we do about that pressure? How do we resist it? What do we do about it? Firstly, we must acknowledge our own need to fit in and ask ourselves, does that feeling come from deep inside me, or do I feel some kind of pressure? Notice yourself demonizing the enemy or demonizing other, and be willing to criticize leaders, be willing to see their flaws, be willing to see that they make errors, identify them when they are charismatic individuals, and learn to be critical of as much as possible, starting with yourself. No status without accomplishment. Only allow yourself to be successful, or to consider yourself successful, when there's a tangible accomplishment that goes along with that. Whatever status you crave or have, identify specific things that cause you to have that status in some way. And there are some basic behaviors we can do that reinforce our individuality and our resistance to conformity. So firstly, avoiding stereotyping others, avoiding judging others. There really are forms of social pressure and identifying with the group. Don't form an opinion of someone based on membership of a group that you might belong to, or membership of a group that they belong to. Whenever there is a group involved, whenever you're agreeing with your group or disagreeing with their group, stop yourself and say, let me look at this as an individual. So think about which groups that you belong to, and bear in mind that you are subject to those pressures. So you might be part of a group of like-minded people, but you've got to ask yourself, what does that have to do with my own path? Look at your own path, and if it doesn't agree with the group, walk your own path. Very importantly is use social media less and less often. If you're using social media, notice what is your behavior. So constantly checking on other people's behavior, constantly sharing what you're doing yourself, constantly liking or going for likes, makes it very hard to identify and develop your individual behavior. Liking others or advertising on social media all the time what you do is a way of gaining status. And so it's actually a group behavior, it's actually a group think behavior. And so sometimes when you're liking something, ask yourself, do I really? When you're about to post something, even if your fabulous holiday, ask yourself, why am I really posting this? And if you keep on going back to check the likes, if you count the likes, in fact, if you've got a problem with Facebook or Instagram removing the count of how many likes you had, you've got a problem. Why do we post? To be liked. Why do we click like? To be part of the group. Break that behavior. And learn to become a critic of media messages, mass messages. Notice how the media tries to shape your own thinking, tells you what's right all the time and what's wrong all the time. So media is a tremendous pressure and is best consumed in extremely small doses, always with a critical eye. Be critical on yourself. Examine your own actions. After each social encounter, when you find yourself judging someone or or responding to someone in some kind of a way. Notice your behavior. So notice why you did something. Was I doing that to please someone or because it was the right thing to do? Was I doing that to avoid being teased? Was I doing that to be accepted or even not noticed in some kind of way? Did I express that opinion in order to be popular? If I think about it myself, I don't really think that, or I feel bad. If you feel bad inside, you know you did it because of the group. So notice the social pressures, and notice when you avoid doing something in order to avoid a reaction. So how do you dress? Think about how you dress. Wear what you want. Wear something that is not fashionable. Wear something that is not in the group. Wear what you want. It's incredible how the response to physical appearance is such a good indicator of social pressure, and one of the ones we feel most vulnerable to. I mean, in some sense, the entire idea of fashion is a form of social pressure, because strictly speaking, it doesn't actually matter what you wear except for the weather. That should be the only guide, and how you feel. And then, very importantly, read widely. Expose yourself to different ideas and different viewpoints. Don't automatically reject the ones that are different from your own. That also means talking to people you wouldn't normally talk to, talking to people who are not in your own community, not in your own age group, not in your own culture. Even traveling. When traveling, don't just do all the usual stuff. Talk to the locals. Just find out that there are many, many, many different ways that make our world. And then examine who inspires you. Why do you do what you do? You know, copying people is very antithetical to the idea of non-conformity. Do you copy or are you inspired? And who is it that inspires you? Look at your influences, examine them critically. Realize you're not the same as that person who inspires you, and you need to do it your way and develop your own style, your own opinions, your own behaviors, your own views. Write a list of what you like to do, what's important to you, your priorities. Keep it away from group ideas, just for yourself. No one's going to look at this list. Write down a list of your own priorities, and then see, every time you're in that group situation, press your own button, look at the list. Does it fit? Persevere despite the feedback you get, because feedback is not good when you're non-conforming. People will pressurize you. People will want you to follow social convention. And don't imagine that just because you don't follow that social convention, that you're somehow immune to it, because you aren't. So all of those pressures are operating on you all the time, and you're never immune from it. And then turn the whole thing around. Talk about what you think. Project your perspective into the world, your opinions into the world. Most importantly, lose the drama. Don't overreact to things. Overreaction winds people up and inspires everyone around you to act badly. So calm your own reactions down, act differently, act considered. Always come from the point of view, they're different from me, it's a situation that I would never do. There's no point in stomping and shouting and getting upset. And very importantly, understand the consequences of action. Being comfortable with your own behavior doesn't mean it doesn't have consequences. Doesn't mean that you won't get negative reactions. Understand the negative reactions that you get and think about them for yourself. Think about, is that part of it, is that worth it? Realize that sometimes expressing an other point of view must be balanced against what are the consequences, is it worth it? Rather than, I express it because most people do, so there won't be any consequences. There's so many situations when you're doing that. There's so many situations which aren't as bad as hurting, cancel culture, doing those very negative kinds of things. There are all sorts of more subtle ways. There's the ways that you prepare for the holidays and take part in the holidays. There's what you feel about going out on New Year's Eve. There's what you feel about what happens the next day. All of those things are all places where social pressure and conformity operate strongly upon us. And there are all opportunities for you to change that. For these holidays, do what you want. Come from your point of view. Express your opinion. Stand up for yourself. And that can be a great way to accept the challenge of being yourself. The ancients said, there is only one purpose of life. You were born as you. The purpose of life is to be you as much and as best as you possibly can. After all, what other purpose could there be if you were born as you? The only thing we can succeed at is being ourselves. Do that to the max. And I'll be back next week with the month ahead for January in the new year. See you then.